Today we celebrate the memorial of St. Francis de Sales. St. Francis de Sales was born in the year 1567 in what today is France. And he had a very promising career ahead of him. He studied to be a lawyer. He had a degree in civil law and also in canon law. But he had in his heart the desire to be a priest, and his dad really opposed this decision. But finally he was ordained a priest in the year when he was 26 years old. And what is especially relevant about St. Francis de Sales? Well, he was a multifaceted person. St. Francis de Sales, first of all, is a doctor of the church. He was a writer. And he wrote over 8,000 letters. But most importantly, his two most emblematic books are Introduction to the Devout Life and The Treatise of the Love of God, both of them classics of spirituality. St. Francis de Sales was also a founder of religious order. He founded the religious order of the Visitation Sisters, alongside another saint, St. John of Chantal. On top of this, St. Francis de Sales was also a bishop of Geneva. And before he was a bishop, he was a great evangelizer. One of his most well-known achievements is that he was sent to a place called the Chablais in today's Switzerland, if I'm not mistaken. And this was a place that was lost completely to Calvinism. Historians say that when he went to that place, the population was of 30,000, and there were only 100 Catholics. He wasn't allowed to preach in churches. And he won over the whole population of that place to Catholicism. How did he do it? They say mostly through two things: his kindness and the way that he was so likable to everyone, but most especially through his writings. He was the first one that we know of that wrote pamphlets and distributed pamphlets. And the interesting thing about his pamphlets is that in a time of harsh antagonism between Catholics and Protestants, his argumentation was always respectful and kind and thorough. So he didn't insult the other side, but rather argued with them in the most persuasive way. And it was through his writings mostly that he won back to Catholicism that whole region. And that's why Francis de Sales is the patron saint of the printing press, of journalists, and of writers, because of the power of his pen in bringing back people to the faith. Let me finish with this. One of also the most outstanding things about St. Francis de Sales was his kindness and sweetness in his writings. When you read his writings, he makes holiness something desirable and attainable. I say this because certain authors, they have a different style. When they talk about holiness, it's like so daunting and so difficult and requires so much self-sacrifice. But when you read St. Francis de Sales, it's so sweet and tender, everything that he says. And this sweetness and tenderness inspired many others later. For example, St. John Bosco named his own congregation Salesians, because he knew that the best way of educating the youth was not with harshness, but rather with this same kindness that was peculiar to St. Francis de Sales. So we could ask ourselves this question: am I kind with others? Am I sweet with others? Is kindness and sweetness a permanent trait of my way in dealing with others? And in this way, do I use sweetness and kindness in bringing others closer to the faith? But most importantly, am I sweet and kind with myself? Because many times we are harsh on ourselves. And St. Francis de Sales says when we are harsh on ourselves, we make it harder to be saints. Not that we indulge in sins, but rather that we understand that we're weak and in need of tender care. So today, brothers and sisters, my encouragement for each one of you is, let's pray to St. Francis de Sales that he would grant us the same sweetness and tenderness that won so many souls over for God.